The institutions of the liberal world order, like the United Nations, the UN, and the International Criminal Court, the ICC, were set up in the aftermath of the Second World War. They were supposed to provide a forum, a place for countries to resolve their disputes without recourse to violence. Lessons were supposed to have been learned from the Second World War. Essentially, their purpose was to provide a legal means to check transgressive states and rein them in. However, the authenticity of this mandate has long been questioned. Critics have been arguing that these institutions live to serve the interests of the world's most powerful nations. For instance, the ICC has ever only prosecuted Africans, and according to Kagame, it represents colonialism. Based on this understanding, these international organizations do not actually impartially meter out justice. Rather, they live to serve primarily the United States of America and her allies. People are free to make up their minds. However, critics have argued that it seems unlikely that the ICC will take a deep investigation regarding the alleged war crimes that have taken place against the Palestinian people. And Netanyahu has already framed such an investigation as anti-Semitic.
When the ICC investigates Israel for fake war crimes, this is pure anti-Semitism.
The UN has proven to be a focus point throughout the recent assault on the Gaza Strip, with the Israeli ambassador to the UN vocally critiquing the institution for not being forceful enough in condemning October the 7th. And as part of the recent Believe Israeli Women drive centered around claims of sexual abuse from October the 7th, women in the UN have also been branded with anti-Semitism for not being vocal enough. Inside the Gaza Strip, many UN facilities have been destroyed, and many UN workers have actually lost their lives. And this was seen by many as very significant, as the UN had already been considering the matter for several weeks. And the invoking of Article 99 by Antonio Guterres himself, by himself alone, was evidence for many that the UN had actually been unable to effectively deal with the matter. And if we bring the conversation to the United States of America, the role of the US in the UN has been seen by many as a controversial matter. As early as the 18th of October, the US were the only nation to vote against a humanitarian pause. More recently, whilst 13 other nations voted in favor, the US vetoed a resolution in the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, for a humanitarian ceasefire. And the UK abstained. And this level of isolation is similar to how isolated Russia were following the invasion of Ukraine. And the implications of this have been recognized by many. Journalists like Muin Rabbani have pointed out how in the aftermath of such a decision, it is now factually incorrect to say that the positions that the US takes pertaining to Israel represent the interests of the wider international community. As the bombs continue to fall on the Gaza Strip, the Western voice is now the exception on the world stage. For many, this vote reflects the reality that these institutions serve exclusively the American interest. And there are parallels to the East Timor genocide in kind, where the US were as well strategically invested in the conflict. Referring to that incident, the US ambassador to the UN, Patrick Moynihan, spoke candidly about how he saw his role as stifling the effectiveness of the organization. At the same time, whilst being the sole entity on the global world stage preventing a ceasefire in Gaza, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, will sit down to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the UN Declaration of HR. Unsurprisingly, many see the contrast, where on one hand, Gaza is being bombed to the ground, decimated, and on the other hand, human rights are being celebrated as a long-existing dynamic, where essentially Western lives are more valuable than other lives. And it is within this framework that John Kirby can presume candidly to claim that whilst the US is the sole nation preventing a ceasefire, that no other nation has done what the United States of America has done for the people in Gaza. And all the while, the US administration are working to bypass Congress in order to secure more ammunition for Israeli Merkava tanks to be used against the Palestinians. What the aforementioned points demonstrate are the wider implications of what is taking place on the ground in Gaza. It is not just a Palestinian question or regional security at stake, but the very visual manner in which things are taking place will likely have an effect on the integrity of the way in which these international organizations are viewed in the future.